Where is Carmen Sandiego? By Cracked Inkwell. Chapter 1, Old Game, New Rules. But why? Smolder whined, do you know how many times we saved Equestria's butt this past year? Twilight closed her eyes and sighed. Before her were 6 of her most diverse students. Sandbar, Yona, Ocellus, Gallus, Smolder, and Silverstream stood behind the desk with disbelief on their faces. The news of what Twilight had to give is difficult. On the contrary, she replied, I'm very much aware of what you 6 have done, and I'm thankful for it. Gallus raised an eyebrow, but unfortunately, it's not so simple. Twilight glanced down at their grades. Being a school, if any of you are expected to pass with the semester, means that you need to have achieved a certain minimum grade. As it stands, all of you have been slipping this semester, especially in geography, history, and cultural studies. She looked up from her papers. Not to say that this has come about from laziness, because that would be unfair to all of you. I know for a fact that certain circumstances have prevented that given this past year. While the rest of your grades in other classes are good, it's these that have given me concern. But isn't there anything we can do? Ocellus asked, a pleading look in her eye. I don't want to leave school failing. Nor do I, Sandbar agreed. Look, you know what has been going on, so is there something we could take that could catch up? Well, Twilight hummed, there might be a way. In the form of summer classes, you all could take. Ugh. Gallus frowned, we'll have to go to summer school. But I don't think it would be for long. After all, you were just a few points away from a passing grade, and it's only in those 3 areas. Plus, it should only take about a few weeks, only until you can pass the final exam. Pony can't keep us here, Yona protested. Yona still wishes to return to Yakyakistan. I understand, but I've already notified all of your parents and guardians about this, and they all agreed that you still need to finish your education. So, we're gonna spend the next who knows how long just studying? Silverstream questioned. Besides, how do you know if what we'll be reading or listening will stick? I could barely keep my eyes open from all that reading from the other classes. Hate to say this, but Silver's got a point, Sandbar said. It wasn't from the lack of trying, but when it came down to it, I could barely remember what exactly we've learned. Twilight sat back in her seat, thinking, humming. Nevertheless, all of you still need to make up your grades somehow. Perhaps, she went quiet for a long time. Yona tilted her head, head mare. Twilight sat up, I suppose, she said, there might be a different approach, but I'm going to need some help from a certain someone. The 6 students looked at one another. So, you have an idea? Smolder asked. It's more of an experiment than anything, since nothing like it has been done before, at least in this universe. What was that? Getting up from her seat, Twilight told them, I think I might be able to make your summer classes a little more interesting. What if instead of studying in the traditional sense, you all instead play a game? But one that is so new to Equestria that it hasn't been tested. A game. Silverstream smiled, oh, I like games. What is it? Hang on there, before anything happens, I would have to run some errands first. So how about this? Tomorrow at 10, all of you to the library where I'll set up the game for you. Hopefully not only will it improve your grades, but you might have fun with it. In an attic, in another universe, a trapdoor opens. Truth be told, I don't if it still works. Sunset Shimmer told Twilight as she climbed up the ladder. Why do you need this old thing anyway? Because I don't want my students to fall behind. Twilight entered the attic, just when a single light bulb illuminates the musty space. And I remember how that game has taught me a lot about the human world, so maybe I could use it to, what's the word, reprogram it? But Carmen Sandiego. Sunset raised an eyebrow. And how exactly are you going to reprogram a game made years ago? Last time I checked, you nearly broke a few computers the last time you were here. I know enough how to start it up and navigate. It's not that hard. But one of the reasons why I need your older one is because it's the only model the game will be able to play on. I can engineer an engine to run electricity to power it, but I just need to bring it to Equestria temporarily. You still haven't answered my question. How are you? Oh, there it is. Sunset spotted the sheet that covered what she was looking for. A layer of 10 or so years of dust tumbled into the air as she revealed the boxy PC and monitor. Beside them, a black keyboard with a mouse lay on top of an ancient mousepad. Hopefully it should still boot up, but I haven't used it since I switched over to using a laptop. At least with the Carmen game, you don't need to be hooked up to the internet. Sunset turned to Twilight. Still, how are you going to reprogram an old PC game? Even I don't know how to do that stuff. I might have a way. Possibly risky, but in theory it could work. Sunset frowned. Okay, for all future references, Twilight, anything risky should be run by me first. Now where do you keep the game? Being avoidant, aren't we? Sunset goes over to open a box. Just promise me that whatever you're going to do won't leak in this world. We've already got enough of those anyway. I promise it won't. Even if something goes wrong, I have a plan. Sunset's suspicion remained as she flipped over the cases of old games that she had forgotten about until she found it. She picked it up. A thin case that had the familiar thief in a red trench coat and hat, holding a rope ladder in one hand and an ancient Egyptian necklace in the other. And above it was the title, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? After being handed over, Twilight opened the case to inspect the disc inside. Okay, no scratches. That's good. So, when was the last time you played this? Honestly? I don't remember. I think I played it a couple of times and was confused by some of the clues. And it can get a little tricky as, if I remember right, Carmen was known for playing a lot of word games. But that's what made it so engaging. What made me learn more about this world was that you must figure out the clues to get to the next level. I'm sure that if I had this game asking about clues of geography, history, or culture from our world, it would be a huge benefit to my students. If you're gonna do that, I'd suggest you be careful. Sunset pointed out, from my experience, weird things happen when you combine human tech with equestrian magic. In front of him, a dusty CD case was held in the light of a sparkling lampshade of a chair. It shone on the desk like a spotlight on a stage, and Discord was intrigued. I suppose I could. And I can see why. Discord stroked his chin, glancing over to Twilight on the other side of the desk. But then again, what are you trying to gain from this easy fix? He leaned forward, showing the black suit he had on with a red flower in its pocket. You come to me on the eve of my dear Fluttershy's bunny's wedding for this favor? Even coming from you, this is quite strange. Do you think you can do it? Twilight asked. An amused laugh escaped him. It's not a matter of doing it, that's easy. I could rewrite how this thing works in an instant. Shape it in any way you desire like fresh cut glass. If I were anyone else who was approached with this offer, I'd say that this is suspiciously out of character, even for you. But then again, who am I to judge? Yes, I can change it to how you want it to be, but, why not you do it? After all, your little miss know everything. Why don't you do this? Twilight shifted in her seat. For a very simple reason, because I don't know how. If I knew a spell that makes you rewrite a game with technology many years advanced from Equestria's, I wouldn't have asked you. Without you, trying to get to do what I'm asking would probably take years at best to try to reverse engineer something like this. But out of everyone, you can easily do it because your magic is interdimensional. What could take years for me, you could do with a snap. And you're doing this for my students. The last thing I want is to have this summer school be so dry and boring, but something that they would be excited to do, wanting to do. This is why I look to this game, because it did make learning fun and engaging, like trying to solve a mystery through knowledge to move forward. I want that same experience for them, but, and this is important, for them to learn from our world. I see. And what exactly would I get out of it? Sorry. Discord floated over the desk. For me, having your summer school students play a game from a different dimension is a bit run-of-the-mill. Have it be edited to educate your students, predictable. But if I'm going to do this, the artist in me wants to have my take on it. Twilight frowned. I'm not going to have you make a different game entirely. Oh, come now, Twilight, have a little faith in me. I'm not against this character here, he pointed at the cover. The idea of a cool thief with gadgets that can steal anything, and porously leaves clues because she loves the thrill of the chase. I'm all for it. But speaking as a member of your staff for your school, I also want them to learn too. If I'm going to be altering this game, I'm going to get them to learn in a way they can't refuse. I don't want you to harm any of them. And they won't. But if I'm going to do it, then I needed to be allowed to add one thing to this game. And there it is, Twilight muttered with a frustrated sigh. What is it? I want the character, Carmen, he tapped on the plastic case, to be able to communicate with whoever is playing. To have some stakes raised a bit, so to get them to be motivated to not just play, but do their research. He offered up his lion's paw. Do we have a deal? As long as none of my students get hurt. Twilight asked, and Discord nodded. With a sigh, she shook it. Deal. Taking hold of the game in his tail, Discord flicked it where a flash of light was seen for a moment, and like that, it was over. Here you go. He handed it back to her. It was nice doing business with you. Suddenly, the broom closet door opened, filling the room with light. Discord? Are you making deals in the closet again? Fluttershy asked in an annoyed tone. What do you take me for, my dear? A mob boss? Discord in a hurt voice. I thought we were friends. Angel and his bride are about to have their dance, you should be there. I'm coming. Discord turned to Twilight with a smirk. I hope you don't mind, but I've added some improvements that I think even you would appreciate. Twilight took the game under her wing, a seed of doubt planted in whether this was a good idea at all. Whatever Discord had done to the game, she hoped, it wouldn't be too serious. On a warm morning when the sun had just risen above the mountains, 6 students made their way toward the school's library. It was rather uncanny to see the School of Friendship be so empty. Devoid from all life except for them as they passed by classroom after vacant classroom. While they were grateful that at least they didn't have to spend so much time with summer school, there was a sense among all of them that they were being robbed. Pushing through the library doors, they found Headmare Twilight there. On one table was an open pink box of donuts, some cups, and a jug of orange juice. On the other was a curious thing that caught their eye when they entered. A machine unlike any of them had seen before. Facing them was a creamy white box that showed a picture of a gentle green hill with a cloud going by, where one corner says Windows XP. Below the screen with a few buttons were 2 wires that were attached to 3 other things, another box that had a slit near the top, a strange mouse-like device laying on a small mat, and a keyboard with words, numbers, and a long black rectangle. Good morning, students, Twilight greeted them. Firstly, thank you all for coming to summer school. Like we had a choice, Smolder muttered under her breath. So firstly, I should point out that things are going to flow a little differently than how your past semesters have been. Firstly, I'm hoping that we could conclude this in a matter of weeks when you shall be given the test again. The class will take place between morning to noon. You will be provided with breakfast on behalf of Pinkie Pie. And all of you will be taught by something quite experimental. You mean from that thing? Silverstream pointed at the machine. Twilight nodded. That is correct. Before we start, I want you all to get acquainted with something that I bet we will see for another few decades. This is called a computer. It runs on electricity, and it will be the base of what could be a revolution in education. Yes, Gallus, one of her students raised a claw. So, how do we use it? I will explain in a minute. But before we get into that, feel free in grabbing a donut and I'll show you what you'll be expecting from this. After each of her students picked out their pastry, Twilight held up the game. For this class, you will be taught by a game. So, a video game. Sandbar asked before taking a bite of his maple bar. Kind of. But this isn't like what you would find in an arcade. I've played this in the past and I found that while it does a good job at teaching you, it also has an engaging character and plot that makes it interesting. What is it about? Ocellus asked after drinking her cup of juice. In the game, you are a detective, and you are on the hunt for the greatest thief in the world, Carmen Sandiego. She can steal anything and is very intelligent. But what makes her interesting, is she leaves clues behind on purpose. That's dumb, isn't it? Yona questioned, why thief leave clues? Because she wants to see if there is anyone who could outsmart her. Now, the game for this is specially made to where it will challenge you what you will have to face for your final test. But I must warn you, the clues she leaves behind won't be so easy to decipher. Just be aware that at times, she will play word games where certain words or phrases will mean something else. So, watch out for those. That said, you will have access to the library to help you out because some of the clues will be difficult. So, in a nutshell, Smolder said, is that our summer class is where we play a mystery game that involves questions from our test, on a thing that none of us have seen before. Pretty much, Twilight nodded. Now let me show you how it works. Twilight went on to explain how to use the computer. Of course, being both an older model and not connected to anything except a generator, all she had to do was how to move the cursor with the mouse, and how to type on the keyboard. She explained that the game requires you to submit your answers to clues by pressing a button under the name Enter. She showed them how to start the game, by moving the cursor towards an icon on the screen. An eye-catching little symbol of a red hat. Then, almost like magic, the monitor went dark except for a thin bar that said it was loading, whatever that meant. In a minute or two, the screen showed a menu that showed a two-legged creature with a long dark red mane in a red trench coat, a wide brim hat that hid her face, and a pair of black gloves that covered her strange talons. The creature stood on top of a building, looking out at a cityscape that looked something like Manhattan. On the left side were two bars that read as New Game or Continue. Once you start playing the game, Twilight explained, you will simply click right over here. She hovered the cursor over Continue. But first, since you're all just starting, you will click here on New Game where it would ask for a name that you want to be called. After clicking on it and a box asking for a name, she turned to them, so what do you want it to be? Couldn't you just put all our names in? Sandbar asked. I don't think so. Twilight looked carefully at a bit of text below it, and it must be under 15 characters. Meaning that whatever you want to put into this, it has to be a single word. Could we make something up? Gallus rubbed under his chin, maybe. I'm hot, you're not. Yona no like, Yona shook her head. What about? Summer club. Too generic, Smolder disagreed. If this is a mystery game, how about Illuminators? Oh, I like that one. Silverstream grinned. Detective Illuminators is pretty catchy. Any objections? Twilight asked, and her student said they didn't. She typed in Illuminators into the computer and clicked on a button to start the game. A moment later, the menu was replaced with a minute or so of animation. It first showed the creature in red in a circle with the words, "Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?" And before anyone knew it, the creature began to move. The computer showed a montage of the creature they assumed to be Carmen making daring escapes in many places all around the world. From stealing a bronze lion statue from a Nepalese temple on a helicopter to carting off a golden sarcophagus in the shadows of the pyramids, and even moving an entire castle with blimps. And then, it cut to black. Then it showed another animation. It showed a hot, scorched landscape of volcanoes and desert. What the? Smolder tilted her head. Hey, I know this place. This is home. Why is it showing the Badlands? Her question was answered when the screen zoomed in on the entrance of a cave. Suddenly, there was a burst of flame, and Carmen ran out of it with something wrapped under her arm. Stop. Theft. On the computer, to Smolder's amazement, the animation showed a pixelated dragon Lord Ember rushing out along with two other dragons. They watched as Carmen rushed out towards the edge of a cliff where she halted. A furious Ember held out her claws. I don't know who or what you are, she told her, smoke huffing out from her nose. But you better drop that before I burn you into a crisp. Who am I? The lady in red tilted her hat up. She spoke in an elegant voice that was brimming with confidence. The name's Carmen Sandiego. And what I am? I'm about to become this new world's queen of crime. Before Ember could do anything, Carmen unexpectedly took a step back and off a cliff. She and the other dragons rushed over to see that Carmen had suddenly sprouted a glider from a backpack. Don't let her get away. Ember leaped after her, and the two other dragons flew with her. They watched as they chased after Carmen, who maneuvered this way and that. Making zigzags and unexpected turns where made it hard for the dragons to catch up. Come on, you guys. Smolder cheered. I can flap those wings faster than you and I'm half your size. And yet, just when one of the dragons was just about to catch her, Carmen suddenly changed directions and they smack face first into a pillar of basalt. It was only until Ember was left, trying her best to keep up with her. I won that scepter fair and square. Ember shouted at her, now give it back. It's mine. You can try, Carmen called back. The screen showed a close-up of her flicking a switch with her thumb, but you'll have to know where I'm going first. Sayonara. And just like that, the glider suddenly sprang rockets, and before Ember could grab her, she zoomed off into the horizon. Forcing to stop, Ember's face went bright red and cursed up a storm. The screen cut to black for a moment before it was replaced by an old typewriter that was branded typograph with a blank sheet of paper. Suddenly, the typewriter began to write on its own. Carmen. Ah, it's good to be back again. I didn't expect the world to be so vastly different, but then again, it makes it more challenging. Don't you agree, detectives? The machine then typed out a single word and a blinking vertical line next to it. Illuminators? The students looked at one another, unsure what to do next. Oh. Here, let me show you how to do this next part. Twilight said as her horn glowed and the keyboard typed out the message, what did you steal, Carmen? Then when you finished writing your message, you press this button here. She pointed at the enter button and pressed it. Within a moment, the game wrote back. Carmen. It wasn't easy to steal something from a dragon lord, but this bloodstone scepter is worth the trouble, don't you think, detectives? Gallus raised an eyebrow. Hey Teach, mind if I try this out? Twilight stepped aside and slowly, Gallus typed out a reply on the confused keyboard. Illuminators? What makes you think there's more than one detective? Carmen. What an easy riddle to ask. The word illuminators is plural. It only stands to reason that there must be more than one of you. Although given who you're up against, you'll need all the help you can get. Illuminators? Why steal a scepter? Carmen. That's only me to know, and you to find out. Twilight. The students and their teacher turned to find Spike rushing into the library, a scroll in claw and panic on his face. Twilight. This is an emergency. What happened? Twilight stepped away from the computer. Ember just sent a letter. She said that something just appeared out of nowhere and stole the Bloodstone scepter. Everyone's eyes went wide. She tried to stop the thief but somehow got away. But that's not even the weird part. She described being a creature that she's never seen before. All in red and goes by the name of Carmen Sandiego. Smolder finished Spike's explanation. Spike blinked. Yeah, how did you know? The students turned to the computer. Guys, did we just see a robbery happen in real time? Twilight went up to the computer and furiously typed out a message. Illuminators? Where are you going next, Carmen? What are you up to? Carmen. Not so fast, detectives. This is my game, and you will play it by my rules. Illuminators? Which are what exactly? Carmen. I will provide you with 6 clues, one at a time. You must figure out where I'm going, and what I'm going to steal next. If you could somehow stop me before I could arrive, I won't steal it. Guess it wrong, and you'll find out my answer the hard way. But I must warn you, detectives, I won't go easy on you, so be alert. Uh-oh, Twilight ran a hoof through her mane. What's wrong? Yona asked. I realize how stupid I really am, Twilight said. I've made a serious miscalculation on my end. What is supposed to be a teaching tool for all of you, I've unintendedly made a character in a game real. Not only that, but I know what she's capable of. She's someone who can steal anything from small national treasures to entire monuments. And the worst part is I don't know if I could shut it off. Why not? Sandbar asked. Think about it, if I turned off the game, we may never know what she's done with that scepter. Oh, crap, Smolder realized in horror. And if no one can get it back? My own kind might break out in a civil war. So, what do we do? Silverstream asked. Maybe the only thing we can do, Ocellus went over to the computer. I think, we should play along. After all, we have a whole library at our disposal. If we could figure out her clues, we could probably send a message to anyone of Carmen coming to steal it. But it won't be easy, Twilight pointed out. I remember playing a version of this game before, but this is taking on new stakes. Then we have an advantage. Ocellus smiled. If you have an idea of what this Carmen can do, it could give us an idea of what she might be up to and how to stop her. Yes, but it's too early to tell. But if we're to capture her quickly, I can't do this alone. Gallus smirked. You know, I wasn't looking forward to summer school when I woke up, but now this is getting exciting. Okay, I'm in. Me too, Smolder nodded. Yona will help. Let's kick some bad guy butt. Sandbar smiled. I'll help too. Silverstream raised her claw. And so will I. Ocellus approached the keyboard. Thief or not, she's not going to have a prayer when we work together. Okay Carmen, she began typing, bring it on. Illuminators? We will stop you. So go ahead, give us your first clue. But as soon as Carmen typed back, Ocellus's confidence waned when she laid eyes on the first clue. Carmen. To gain a new seat, is to have a change in view. Let the games begin, detectives. Chapter 2, Catch Me If You Can. Honestly, the clue doesn't make any sense. Gallus let out a frustrated sigh, closing the book he had a little too hard. Gallus. Twilight chided, we're in a library. Show a little more respect for the books. I can't say I blame him, Headmare, Silverstream frowned, flipping through a history book. I don't even know where to look with a clue like that. Twilight didn't say anything, she returned her attention to the ring of books that went around her. Internally, she wasn't sure where to start either. The clue that Carmen gave was rather vague. All her students, including Spike, have been spending the last hour trying to figure out what it could mean. From bringing in a chalkboard to divide up each word, to bringing in every book they could find that had to do with history, geography, or culture. All the students were flipping through books in trying to deduce what Carmen could mean. All, that was, except for Ocellus, who stared at the board, studying silently those words. To gain a new seat, is to have a change in view. Maybe it might have something to do with the hippogriffs. Sandbar suggested aloud. Silverstream tilted her head. What makes you say that? Well, the clue said about a change in view. Maybe it might have something to do with how the hippogriffs dealing with the changes being out of Sequestria. And maybe the word seat has something to do with power since the Storm King was defeated. Okay, but what exactly would she steal? Silverstream asked, and Sandbar had his mouth open to answer, but nothing came out of it. Ocellus looked at the chalkboard again, and a thought came to her. Headmare? You said that Carmen was known for playing word games, right? Twilight looked up. Yes. Why? I've been thinking, this clue is worded oddly. And I've been wondering, why did Carmen say, gain a new seed? It makes me wonder if that has some other meaning. Then a thought came to her. Headmare, do we have a thesaurus? In a moment, Twilight summoned the book over to her, by now gaining the attention of her friends. What Ocellus thinking? Yona asked. Question, what's another word for seed? Ocellus opened the book and flipped it over to the S section, eventually finding the word. I have a feeling that Carmen is going after a seat of some kind. But what? Let's see. Here we are: seat, chair, armchair, bench, couch, pew, stool, throne. Smolder snapped her talons. Whoa. Wait a minute. I think that's it. What is? Everyone else asked. Think about it. First Carmen steals a scepter. Now she's laying out a clue about gaining a new seat. How much you like to bet she's going to steal a throne? But if that's true, which one? Spike pointed out. I know there are at least a dozen thrones throughout the world. How do we know which one she's going after next? That, and how do we know if that's the kind of seat she's referring to? Smolder approached the board, her eyes squinting. What do you think she means by, to have a change in view? That just sounds odd, isn't it? Not really, and that's probably the most confusing part of the whole clue, Twilight said. A change in view could probably refer to anything in Equestria alone. There have been a lot of changes, from the Crystal Empire showing up, to the hippogriffs regaining Mount Eris, or even... Oh! Ocellus exclaimed suddenly, as though she was given an electric shock. Oh, I get it. Ugh. It's so simple. What are you talking about? Gallus asked. I think I figured it out. The clue, it makes sense now. How exactly? Spike raised an eyebrow. To gain a new seat. I think it's referring to not just any throne, but one that's new. And a change in view. Hello. Change in. Changeling. She's going to the Changeling Hive to steal the new throne. Gallus tilted his head. There's no way it could be that simple. Twilight hummed. I'm not saying that you're wrong, Ocellus. But it is possible. Honestly, that's what makes the game so challenging. It only makes sense after the fact. And while it is a strong possibility, there might be other thrones to consider that might fit those criteria. Like what? Yona asked. For example, it could also point toward the Crystal Empire. Because they have a relatively new leader and have gone through some changes since they reappeared. It also could be Luna's throne, as I know that she had hers installed recently, and she had gone through a lot of changes herself. Then again, it could also mean she might go after one of the thrones in my crystal castle. She hummed. That makes the most sense to me. What do you mean? Spike tilted his head. Let's break down the clue one more time. To gain a new seat, suppose that means that there might be more than one seat she intends to steal. Makes sense, there can't be an old seat if there isn't a new one. Is to have a change in view. That part of the clue makes sense if there's something there that keeps changing. And the one throne, or thrones that I can think of that does that is the map that shows a friendship problem. Knowing how clever Carmen is, this is something she would likely do, steal something right underneath our noses. On the computer, a chime was heard. They saw on the screen a message from Carmen. Carmen. Time's almost up, detectives. Have you figured out my clue yet? Nodding, she made up her mind. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Spike, you stay behind with Yona, Sandbar, and Silverstream. Keep an eye on the computer to see if there are any changes or anything further from Carmen. Gallus, Ocellus, and Smolder, you three will come with me to the castle. Spike, I want you to answer the question wrong, that way when she shows up at the throne room, we could stop her before she steals. But wait for my signal. Now let's go. Twilight galloped out with Gallus, Ocellus, and Smolder in tow. Approaching the computer, Spike and the remaining students looked at the screen when a question came to Sandbar. So, what if we get this wrong? Wrong. Yona raised an eyebrow. Yeah, what if Carmen doesn't show up anywhere near where Twilight thinks she's going? I don't know, Spike shrugged, let's just hope we might be right. Another message popped up on the screen. Carmen. Have you figured out my clue, detectives? A moment later, Spike burped up a note from Twilight, saying that they were ready. So instinctively, Spike typed out a reply before hitting send. Illuminators? You're going to steal Luna's throne from Canterlot Castle. Carmen. Sorry, better luck next crime. On the screen, it played a new scene. And as soon as it started, those watching it were alarmed by it. I don't think that's anywhere near Twilight's castle. Indeed, it was not. They witnessed a pixelated animation where it showed the grassy meadows and the rocky tower of the Changeling Hive. It then showed two changelings. All I'm saying is art and QVAFs would be better if it included dance as well. But we already have that with theater. I know, but I figured that if dance is an art, then it should be expanded. Who is that? It then cuts to Carmen sitting on the wooden throne. The two changelings went up to her saying, "Hey, what are you doing? You can't sit there. That's Thorax's. This is a wonderfully made throne. An honest elegance to its craftsmanship." Carmen commented, tracing a finger across the armrest. "I think I'll take it with me." Suddenly, right behind the changeling throne, a series of very large balloons inflated up, each showing the icon of Carmen's logo as it got bigger and bigger until the roots of the throne were being pulled up. Being lifted off the ground with dirt falling off and taking Carmen with it. It is at this moment that Thorax walked on the scene. "What the? Thanks for the new seat, Your Highness. Au revoir." "Hey. Give that back." Thorax's wings unfolded, flying up to try to reach Carmen. But before he could get a hold of her or the throne, it suddenly zoomed away by a propeller attached to the back. Thorax could do nothing but watch as he saw his throne disappear beyond the horizon. Moments later, Twilight and the other students returned to the library. "What happened?" she asked. "Did something happen?" "You can say that," Silverstream said. "In fact, Ocellus, you were right. She made off with the changeling throne," Spike told them. "What?" Ocellus's wings flared out in alarm. "What happened?" "Carmen had balloons and a propeller on the back of the chair, and she just flew off with it," Sandbar explained. The screen changed back to the typograph page where a new message was typed out. "Carmen. I'm beginning to wonder if you're trying, detectives? My latest theft was like taking candy from a baby." Ocellus marched up to the computer and typed back. "Illuminators? Don't get your ego too big, we will bring you down." We will bring you to justice for this. Carmen. Threaten me all you like, detectives. It hasn't stopped me from taking the throne. Perhaps I might get lucky next time around. Speaking of which, are you ready for my next clue? Ocella scowled and slapped the side of the boxy monitor. So, what do we do now? Gallus asked. The only thing we can do. Twilight approached the computer. We must keep going. Ocellus, I know you're upset, but if we are to catch her, we need all the info on her that we can get. What info? Ocellus questioned. We're nowhere near catching her then from the start. Not true. Because if there's anything that I remember about playing this game, is that Carmen has a theme with her crimes. A theme? Smolder asked, like what? For example, I remember playing a game where she was stealing all these monuments and statues, where the clues were game-based. And it turned out, she was stealing for pieces for the world's biggest game of chess. So even if we don't stop her here, the more we play, the more we'll figure out what she's up to. Huh, Yona tapped her chin, thief steals scepter, and now throne. Could Carmen getting stuff related to royalty? It's very possible. But it may not be the only thing. Twilight pointed out. We don't know what she's planning or what the theme might be. However, the best way we can figure that out is to keep playing. Twilight then typed in the computer. Illuminators? What's your next clue, Carmen? Carmen. You would need a pearl of wisdom for submerging this clue, detectives. Chapter 3, Almost Got Her. Twilight scratched her head. Her students crowd around her to look at the latest clue that Carmen had sent. There was a moment when none of them said anything. What does it say? Spike asked, trying to see what they were looking at. You would need a pearl of wisdom for submerging this clue, detectives. Sandbar read aloud. Okay, so it's about a pearl, but where is she going next? Ugh. Smolder ran her claws over her head. Why must these clues be so hard? How are we supposed to figure out where she's going next from a clue like that? Now, Twilight told her. Let's not get discouraged here. We just need to think this rationally about it. Turning towards the chalkboard, her horn glowed and erased the previous clue off. Okay, so, let's take this clue apart piece by piece. She wrote out the clue on the board. Maybe the best way to deduce where she's going and what she's going to steal next, we need to take this slow. Gallus frowned. You would need a pearl of wisdom. There isn't any artifact or royal object that has pearls involved, right? Not in Equestria as far as I'm aware, Twilight said. Unless you count Celestia's earrings she wore on occasion, but I don't think that's it. Why's that? Yona asked. Think about what she's stolen so far, the Bloodstone Scepter and now Thorax's throne. The only thing those two have in common is that they belong to their respective leaders. As she spoke, Silverstream looked down at the fractured pearl around her neck. So, assuming that Carmen might be going after the treasures of world leaders, the only thing I could think would match the clue would be Antinovo's pearl. Silverstream finished the sentence. Ocellus craned her neck around. How do you know? Partly because it's the most important pearl to us hippogriffs and sepones, and partly from the other half of the clue. The word submerging. I guess it only makes sense if the pearl Carmen is talking about isn't out of the water. Which means she's heading towards Sequestria. I mean, that makes the most sense, Spike commented. Okay, but how do we know if that's possibly the right answer? Gallus questioned. I mean, we got it dead wrong the last time. Perhaps it isn't, Twilight said, but on the other hoof, I'm reminded of a famous quote from Sherlock Holmes. When you have eliminated the impossible, that whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And this time, I think Silverstream might be correct. Great. So, we know where she's going and what she's going to steal. Sandbar clapped his hooves. What do we do now? Sequestria is really far away. It would take days to get there by train. Twilight smiled, not if you know how to teleport at long distances. And luckily, I know how. But the trouble is that I could do it one at a time. Silverstream, since you have a piece of the pearl, I think I'm going to need your help when we get to Sequestria. Spike, you and the others stay here and keep an eye on the computer to see if Carmen says or does something. When she does, send a message to me immediately. But what about the clue? Ocellus pointed out. Should we answer it correctly when she asks? After thinking of it, Twilight replied, maybe this time we should answer correctly and see what happens. Hopefully she may not even go near the pearl, but we're still going there just in case. Offering her hoof to Silverstream, her student took hold, and in a flash, the two were gone. Silverstream, Han, what are you doing back here so early? Queen Novo asked, swimming over to her niece. As soon as they had martialized on the beach of Mount Eris, Silverstream used her shard of the pearl to turn her and Twilight into Seapenes. They hurried underneath the waves, hoping that they weren't too late. Thankfully they were let inside of the undersea palace when Silverstream asked to see her aunt. And Princess Twilight, I thought you were teaching summer school. Yes, I know. Twilight interrupted, but this is an emergency. For what, dear? Novo tilted her head. What's wrong? First, do you still have your pearl? Novo blinked, why yes, I still have it in my possession. For a moment she looked overhead to the enormous jellyfish that floated over her throne. She raised an eyebrow. Why? If you're planning on stealing again. No auntie, but that's why we're here, Silverstream said. Someone is going to try to steal the pearl. Now hang on, what are you talking about? Who's going to steal it? A rather skilled thief, Twilight told her. All I can say is that because of her, the Bloodstone Scepter from the Dragonlands and the Changeling Throne have been taken. We believe that the pearl is her next target. We're here to prevent that from happening, but we can't do it alone. Will you help us? Novo turned to her niece. Silver, is this true? She nodded. After a beat, she called out, guards. Summon General Seabreeze. Have more guards securing the pearl. Get the navy position over Sequestria and have the army be positioned around the palace. She turned to her niece, come on honey, let's go catch a thief. It's almost been an hour now, Gallus paced about. Anything yet from Carmen? Yona glanced over at the computer screen. Nothing yet. Over by a desk, Spike had a note prepared, ready to send to Twilight. Along with some blank parchment in case something unexpected happens. Meanwhile, Ocellus had been going about the library picking out a series of books. Smolder, who was bored of waiting, went over to her to ask, what are you doing? I'm gonna see if I could get one step ahead of Carmen, she said, placing the books on a nearby table. How are you going to do that? Sandbar asked. We don't know what she's up to. Not quite. This got every creature's attention. Ocellus flew over back to the history section, her wings humming while she searched the shelves. Twilight said that Carmen tends to work off from a theme. So far, the only thing that is connecting it all is that they're all symbols or objects of power. The Bloodstone Scepter is used to establish who is the Dragon Lord. Us changelings used to have an anti-magic throne before it was destroyed and replaced with something different that shows who we are now. The pearl that she's going to steal is in possession of the Hippogriff Queen that has the power to transform and link land and sea. Okay. Smolder raised an eyebrow. And your point? Ocellus smirked, think about it, she's going after objects that all have to do with power, right? So logically, if we look up all objects around the world that is powerful, be it symbolic or otherwise, it will narrow down the search and, in a way, help predict what she might be going after next. Huh, Spike blinked, that's actually really clever. And then, from the computer, came a chime. They looked, and it was Carmen. Carmen. Time is nearly up, detectives. Have you solved my next clue yet? Spike picked up the note and immediately sent it with his dragon fire. Yona thinks that thief will be caught, Yona said in a hopeful tone. Surely hippogriffs would catch her in act. A moment later, Spike burped up a dripping wet note. It was short and it told Spike to answer the question correctly. So going over to the keyboard, he typed out. Illuminators? Queen Novo's pearl in Sequestria. Instead of getting a reply from Carmen, the computer showed another animated scene. Although done in a hurry, the Sepanese had gathered with spears to defend their national treasure. On the surface, every boat the Hippogriff Navy had was keeping their eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. Below, patrols swam around the entrances to Sequestria with sharks. Meanwhile, the Great Palace had 2 rings of security, one that surrounded the palace, and the rest inside the throne room where everyone has their eyes on the giant jellyfish. At her throne, Novo was flanked by guards, her general, her niece and Twilight. She sent the message to Spike and was hoping that they were correct this time. And then, a guard came swimming in with urgent news, "My queen. Something strange is approaching from the south." "What is it?" "I don't know. It's like a giant lobster and it's heading this way." "I'll go see." General Seabreeze placed a war helmet on his head. "Stay at your posts and don't let that pearl leave your sight." Outside, the patrol saw the thing approach. It was as long as a while, had claws like a lobster, and bright red with seemingly one yellow eye peering out. Of course, they sent out their sharks to attack. But the thing was too big for its jaws to bite at. In a moment, the general looked out and saw what was approaching. The patrol turns to him asking what that is. "It's a submarine, an underwater ship of iron and steel that allows someone from the surface to travel under the waves." "Sir, what do we do? Should we go after it?" "No." This surprised his patrol. "But sir, the thief is right there." "Maybe, but from what Twilight has told me, Carmen is a clever one, so chances are, us leaving our post is exactly what she might be hoping for." "Well, we're not going to." "Then what do you suggest?" The general smirked. "Just you wait." He then picked up a shiny bit of sea glass. Carmen's submarine was getting closer and closer, but then, at a certain moment, the general flashed its reflection towards the sub's direction. And suddenly, beneath the machine 2 enormous whales rose up with a pair of Sepanese guiding them. The vessel, try as it may, was caught from underneath and was forced to head towards the surface. Within a moment, the submarine was forced above the water, marooning in place while the naval ships above circle it. Seabreeze smiled. "Got her." He then turned to the guards. "Stay at your post until I give all clear. I have a feeling we may not be out of this just yet." It was a curious sight to see a submarine stranded over 2 whales. By the time Twilight, Silverstream, and Novo had come to the surface and transformed, there were some curious bystanders from the beach who have gathered to see what was going on. The Navy did its best to keep them at bay while the 3 of them climbed on the vessel. Up front where the yellow dome-shaped window was a shadow of the thief. At the top was a circular door and wheel that locked it in place. So then, Novo turned to Twilight. "Shall you do the honors?" Twilight's horn glowed, her aura gripping on the wheel and turning it hard until it came loose. The airlock unlatched with a noticeable pop, and she was able to pull it open to a ladder and another door. Climbing down into the cramped space to the heavy door before them. Unlocking it, Twilight pushed it open to show a control room, a chair with its back against them, and a noticeable red hat. Carmen Sandiego, Queen Novo walked forward. "As monarch of both the Hippogriffs and Sepanese, I am placing you under arrest." But the chair didn't move. Suspicion rose as she took hold of the chair and turned it around. The only thing they found was the hat sitting on top, a boxy TV monitor with a camera, and a decorative golden cup beside it. On the screen was the pixelated Carmen, clapping. "Bravo, detectives," she said. "I was getting worried I might be too smart for any of you to play." "What is this?" Novo demanded. "What kind of a coward are you that you couldn't be here to steal a national treasure from us?" "With all due respect, Your Highness, but I wasn't talking to you." Silverstream walked forward in front of the camera. "We stopped you, have we? Like I said, I won't steal if you correctly answer my clue, and you did. So don't worry, I'm dropping the pearl and will be going for my next crime." Carmen smiled. "So detective, are you ready for my next clue?" "Where are you?" Twilight asked. "Oh, come now, where's the fun if I gave it all away?" "Don't you worry, you'll know exactly where I am at the very end of the game. Now, are you ready for my next clue?" Twilight nodded. "Good. This time since you're here, I've decided to give you a little something," she said, pointing her head towards the cup before the screen went static. It was surreal to see the events unfold before their eyes in this pixelated form, but the students and Spike have seen everything, including their friend in real time picking up the cup. Then it dissolved into a close-up of the object. It was a decorative, golden chalice that had eagle wings. But it was clear that this was meant to be ceremonial as there were so many holes in it. Silverstream twisted the cup this way, and that is where they saw that on the inside of the cup was the following inscription: "Your chances of success bore as much as a leaky cup." Chapter 4, Honor Among a Thief. "Something is off about all this," Smolder said, staring at the reflection on the computer screen. An intense look showed back her elbows up, claws together under her chin, and a serious look. On the screen was their next clue in pixelated form. "About clue?" Yona inquired. Smolder shook her head. "No, I think out of all the clues Carmen left behind, this one is the most obvious. But I can't help but feel that we're still missing something here. Only I'm not sure what." "Obvious is right," Gallus agreed. "Your chances of success bore as much as a leaky cup. The golden cup is screaming griffin, not to mention the wordplay Boreas is referring to the idol of Boreas. Though I don't know if she would be able to get it." "Why is that?" Sandbar asked. "Because it's lost. Last time it was ever seen, it fell off a cliff that has winds too strong and unpredictable for Enigraph to get it back." "Maybe," Ocellus nodded, "a collection of books and notes strewn about a nearby table, but if there's one thing we know about Carmen for sure, is that we shouldn't underestimate her." Just then, Twilight and Silverstream had appeared in the library in a flash of light. Silverstream carried the physical clue in her talons. "The pearl is safe," Twilight told them, "and Carmen left this clue behind." "We know," Spike said, "we all saw." "Huh?" Silverstream blinked. "How did you know?" "The computer showed it." Spike pointed. "It showed an animation of how you captured the submarine, that Carmen tricked you guys and left that thing." "As it was happening." Twilight raised an eyebrow. "So apparently, this old computer has some sense of omnipotence. Also," Gallus went up to Twilight, "we've figured out pretty quickly what the next clue is." "You have?" Silverstream blinked. "That inscription in the cup, it's referring to the idol of Boreas in Griffinstone." "The idol?" Twilight hummed in thought. "Wasn't it lost down a deep cavern with unpredictably strong winds?" "It is. That's where I'm a little confused though. How is she planning on stealing something that is lost? No one has been able to go down there because it's too dangerous to fly. Plus, it doesn't fit the pattern," Smolder said, getting their attention. "Pattern?" Spike asked. "What pattern?" "I've been thinking about what Ocellus said earlier." Smolder pointed out, "So far, all Carmen has done is to go after objects that have something to do with holding power, right? The idol doesn't seem to quite fit because I know that since it's been lost, it doesn't count as a symbol of power as no one there has it." Gallus, Didn't you say, there hasn't been a king for so many moons? If Carmen steals by a theme, then I'm not sure if it has anything to do with power. Yona hummed, there's truth what Smolder says. Yak wonders same too. But we shouldn't dismiss it, Ocellus raised a hoof. In fact, I've been narrowing down what Carmen might be going after. You have? Twilight went over to Ocellus, looking over at the notes and books open. What's all this? Research, Ocellus said proudly. Since Carmen has so far stolen or attempted to steal things that have to do with power, along with her going around to other creatures, it got me thinking of all the artifacts that represent authority of some kind. She picked up a scroll. For instance, the buffalo tribe that's near Appaloosa has a chief whose symbol of authority is a headdress with feathers. Or in Mandia, there's a famous peacock throne that used to sit the Moguls of their empire. In the Crystal Empire, the most famous example of power and stability is the Crystal Heart. I've been looking into objects around the world that could help narrow the search. Good thinking, Ocellus. This should help get us one step ahead of Carmen. Speaking of which, Twilight turned around. If Carmen is going to Griffinstone, then perhaps I should take Gallus with me this time. There might be one problem with that, Gallus pointed out. I don't know if you noticed, but Griffinstone has fallen on hard times, so maybe unlike what happened with Sequestria, the Griffins might not even care unless you bring a mint with you. This gave Twilight pause. But a thought began to form in her mind, you're right. But at the same time, I want to try something else. Turning to Spike she told him, when Carmen asks for an answer, answer it correctly. Gallus, you come with me and follow my lead. Something else. Silverstream raised an eyebrow, Headmare, what are you going to do? The unexpected. She answered. You wanna run that by me again? Gallus looked at Twilight, perplexed. Having teleported to Griffinstone with Gallus, they stood within mere feet of the gaping abyss where the winds howled upward. Behind them was the ruined city of Griffinstone. They were the only ones by the side of the cliff as none of the griffins there seemed to notice them. Even if they did, they shrugged and went about with their day. However, what Twilight had in mind she figured she wouldn't even need any help at all. Twilight glanced this way and that along the ledge. The only thing that stood out was the long dead tree that teetered on the very edge with its roots being the only thing that kept it there. We aren't going to do anything, Twilight repeated. Gallus's jaw hung slightly wider. I'm sorry, but isn't the idea of coming out here to stop her? If I'm right, we might not need to. Smolder might have a point, the idol doesn't seem to fit with the overall theme, and it's that out-of-place theft that I'm counting on. But why? I thought you told Spike to answer the clue correctly this time. Exactly. And if the computer game is omnipotent as I think it is, then I want to see what it would do if we did answer it correctly but did nothing. And what's the point in doing that? What are you hoping to get out of doing that? Answers if we're lucky. Just then, Spike's flaming scroll materialized in front of her. Quickly unraveling it, she read the note. They just answered the clue correctly, now it's only a matter of time before. Before she could finish her thought, suddenly, right out of the cannon, there was a series of booms followed by 6 jetting cables that flung out. They looked up to see the ends of the cables popped open into 3-pronged grappling hooks. One of them wrapped around the dead tree. Gallus's wings flared up, you know this could be a trick. Twilight didn't answer her student. The cables around them tightened, and out from the dark cavern, something rose out into the light. It was Carmen with one hand on her hat, the other on the idol. She had on a backpack where all the cables were attached that was pulling her out from the windy abyss. She's got the idol. Gallus was about to rush out, but Twilight's magic tugged at his tail. Wait, don't do anything. But trust me on this. Carmen rose out from the gaping gulf like a phantom, to which she drifted over to them. Now up close, they can see that Carmen was still pixelated, But now something about her was new. She was more defined, like lines, like a living drawing, but still pixelated enough to where when she talked, she simply opened and closed her mouth. "Well, hello there, detectives. Fancy seeing you two out here. How did you get the idol?" Gallus questioned. "No one can get it from down there. You know, it's rather amazing what one could accomplish by simply looking at a problem from a different perspective. If I couldn't go down, why not start from the very bottom and work your way in?" She held up the very beaten-up idol. "It's rather a pity, this used to be so grand, now look at it. Nothing but a broken cup now. Here, detective, catch." Carmen threw the idol at Gallus, and the surprised Griffin caught it. "What?" He blinked. "But you took it?" Carmen smiled. "I could. But I'm handing this one over for two reasons: that your fellow detectives have answered my clue correctly. And I'm not just your common thief. Anyone with a brain could steal anything if they put their mind to it, but it takes a special kind that makes the theft worthwhile. After all, as they say, knowledge is power." "What are you up to, Carmen?" Twilight questioned. "None of your latest heists are adding up. Haven't you guessed it yet? But then again, you always have been too preoccupied with gathering information. However, what you never learned from me is that sometimes the packaging is just as important as the information. That reminds me," reaching into her red trench-coated, she pulled out a dark blue envelope. "You'll need an oracle to nix this clue, detectives." She threw the envelope at them as hard as she could, yet given the winds, it flew upwards. "Antiogiatura, detectives? Gallus, get the clue." Twilight ordered. "I'll go after Carmen." Just as the griffin sprung into the air to try to catch the envelope, Twilight opened her wings and flew towards Carmen. But with a smirk on her pixelated face, she did the unexpected. All the cables that held her up came undone, and Carmen fell towards the abyss. Twilight's horn glowed as she was about to cast a spell to catch her, but then Carmen flipped over, and the backpack opened into a glider where she zoomed off with the winds out of the canyon and zipped off in the distance. Meanwhile, Gallus flew up over the storm-like winds as the envelope flew this way and that. He was chasing after it and hoping that he wouldn't lose it. His focus was on that slip of paper, for without it, they couldn't figure out what Carmen might go after next. But it was difficult. The winds and the dancing letter made it almost impossible to grab, yet with persisting, he caught it in his claw. "I got it," Gallus said, looking down. He spotted Carmen flying away as Twilight retreated to the same spot. Flying over towards her, he commented, She's harder to catch than an eel." "So, what was the point of all that? We're nowhere than when we were from the start." "Not quite." Twilight brushed some stray hair from her face. "We learned something important here." "We did." Gallus blinked. "She doesn't want any of the things she's been stealing." She pointed to the idol. "None of the things she's after are important to her." "But why?" Gallus picked up the idol. "If she's going after all these things that have to do with power, what's the point of stealing something like this but then giving it back? Either the theme doesn't have anything to do with power, or she's trying to prove a point. After all, she has a point. She could steal anything from our world, but Carmen doesn't steal things for their value. Often, everything she steals has a point of some kind." Then after a beat, she added, "It makes me wonder if we're seeing the trees for the forest. That we're not looking at the overall big picture, only I'm not entirely sure what it is yet. Perhaps it's all a puzzle." Gallus thought aloud, "Speaking of which, let's see what Carmen's next clue is." Back at the library, the students looked on as Gallus opened the dark blue envelope. Inside was a note that read, "Dear detectives, I've gone to Fengaris to get a diadem. Love, Maria." Gallus looked up, confused. "Who's Maria?" Chapter 5, Nocturnal Crown. Yona stumped. She said, pulling on her locks. What clue mean? Before a chalkboard, Twilight and Spike had the clue taped in the center with questions scribbled around it. Questions that asked things like, who or what is Fengaree? Who's Maria? What's a diadem? What did Carmen mean by Nyx and Oracle? Okay, I kinda have an idea what she's after, Smolder said, holding a dictionary. Listen to this: diadem, noun, a jeweled crown or headband worn as a symbol of sovereignty. In other words, she's getting herself a crown. That narrows down the search a little. Ocellus flipped open books that had slips of paper sticking out. Still, not by much. A lot of kingdoms around the world have crowns, and most of them are from museums. This gave Gallus a moment of pause. Hey, what about those that are still worn today? Huh. Well, think about it. So far Carmen has stolen or at least attempted to from royals that are living, right? So what if Carmen is aiming to take stuff from those who are in power now? If that's true, then we could rule out everything from a museum. Something else I noticed too, Silverstream added. We could also rule out the places she's been to as well. She doesn't seem to strike in the same kingdom twice. Oh, I haven't thought of that. Sandbar agreed. Okay, so she isn't going to the Dragonlands, the Changeling Hive, Sequestria, or Griffinstone. But that still leaves out the rest of the world though. Spike turned away from the board. Still, it does help a little. But this clue is a tougher one though. Sandbar turned towards the board, looking at the physical copy of the clue. Yeah, no, I don't know if it's useful or not, but... What is it? Twilight raised an eyebrow. Well, why is it blue? This got every creature's attention. I mean, think about it, Sandbar pointed out. If you're going to write a letter, is it normally white? But this is blue. A dark blue that kinda makes it hard to read what it says. Maybe that's a clue. Your guess is as good as mine. Smolder walked up to the board and pointed. What makes it frustrating for me is this word here. Fengaree. I looked up through the dictionary at least a dozen times and I can't find that anywhere. Makes me wonder if it's not even equestrian or something. Then, Twilight's eyes widen. Smolder, you're a genius. Say what? No wonder why it's so confusing. You're right, that word isn't equestrian at all. It's old Pegasi. I'll be right back. Twilight was gone in a flash, and a moment later, returned with a book. She quickly flipped through it and nodded. Aha! Now we're getting somewhere. Fengaree is an ancient Pegasi word for moon. Twilight took the piece of chalk, crossed out Fengaree and diadem, and scribbled in the moon and crown. Silverstream tilted her head, reading aloud, Dear detectives, I've gone to the moon to get a crown. Love, Maria. But Headmare, that still doesn't make sense. Does that mean she's going to the moon? Not quite, Twilight told her, we've solved only a portion of this puzzle. But we're getting closer. Carmen said about needing an oracle and Nyx. Oh. Ocellus raised a hoof. Wait a minute, Headmare. Nyx was also the ancient Pegasi goddess of night. So would that mean that she might be targeting a Pegasi settlement like Cloudsdale? Not so fast, Ocellus. Smolder raised a claw. There's another piece we haven't figured out yet. Who's Maria? And what does she have to do with this clue? Sandbar's eyes widen. Hey, what if we're looking at that wrong? What does pony mean? Yona asked. What if Maria isn't a who, but a what? He pointed at Twilight. Headmare, I think I remember something from your history class once. You said that when Galloplio was making his observations through his telescope, he thought that those dark patches on the moon were oceans. So, he named them after the Pegasi word for sea, Maria. Dark patches, Twilight muttered, before her eyes sprang open. Oh. I know what Carmen is going after next. You do, every creature asked at once. Snatching the note off the board, she told them. Sandbar, you're right, This color of paper was chosen as part of the clue. Now think about this, who's the only royal that has a night theme, has a crown where part of it is from the moon itself, and is dark blue? Princess Luna. Twilight summoned a scroll, scribbled a quick message, and told Spike to send it immediately. After breathing fire where the ashes were sent towards Canterlot, she told her students, "Good work, every creature. When Carmen is ready, answer her clue correctly. I will head up to meet up with the princesses to prepare for her. Don't you want any of us to come with you?" Gallus asked. "This time I don't think it would be necessary. Besides, we have the royal guard that should outnumber her. Now the sooner I get over there to help plan it out, the sooner Carmen will be captured. In the meantime, keep an eye on that computer there and let me know if anything changes." In a burst of light, Twilight had teleported over to Canterlot Castle. While they waited for Carmen, Ocellus turned her attention to the computer game. She noticed that on the side there was, as she calls it, a button. One was a detective's guide that was a notebook of the things they'd studied before. There was a button that showed a written record of the other clues. A world map. And the most interesting of all, the recordings of Carmen's crimes. They showed in the animated form of what had occurred, both Carmen's successful thefts and their thwarting it. However, as Ocellus was looking through a few of them in hopes of finding anything useful, she noticed something. At the bottom, there was a close-captioned transcript of the crimes that occurred. "I wonder if something's wrong with this game," she said aloud. "Why?" Spike asked. "What's wrong with it?" "Just something odd I've noticed. Except for the last clue that was answered, the others showed a grammatical mistake." "What Changling mean?" Yona asked. "For example, Ocellus moved the mouse to click on Carmen's first crime. Look at what the Dragon Lord said down here and tell me if something's off." After clicking on it, the other students gathered around as they rewatched the robbery. Carmen ran out with the Bloodstone scepter, and Ember emerged out of the cave for someone to stop her. "There," Ocellus pointed out, "did you see that?" "Huh," Sandbar tilted his head, "thief is spelled wrong." "Okay, but so what?" Gallus questioned, "Maybe whoever made this thing probably didn't notice the mistake." "And that might be true," Ocellus nodded. "However, it's just odd that the rest have a word misspelled. If it was carelessly made, you'd think there might be more. But no, it's just in some very specific areas. I don't know if it means anything, but I just find it strange." Suddenly, the computer rang out with a new message from Carmen. "Carmen. Have you solved my clue yet, detectives?" "1 second, Spike told everyone, sending a note to Twilight with his dragon fire. "Okay Twilight, it's showtime." He typed in. "Illuminators. Princess Luna's crown. Canterlot Castle." They watched the screen as it changed to the great throne room in Canterlot with guards nearly everywhere and the princesses in the center. Ocellus paid close attention to the caption as the scene unfolded. "Are you sure it's only my crown the thief is after?" Luna asked, her regalia removed and replaced with battle armor. "Surely the safe in the royal vaults should be more than plenty to keep our intruder away." "I wouldn't be so sure," Twilight said, "from what I've seen, it's best not to underestimate her." Luna smiled, "I agree with you. If she is as smart as you say she is, I believe that I am at least one step ahead of her." Twilight looked up, a raised eyebrow. "Why is that?" "If I were a thief, and if I expected to find a crown, I'd go to the most secure vault of the place as that is where the jewels are kept. Little does she know, she will not find my crown there. Instead, she will be walking into a trap. I've already stationed the finest guards there to catch her in the act." "So, where's your crown now?" "With me, of course." Luna looked over her shoulder this way and that. Sure, that it was safe, she lit up her horn and in a burst of light, her dark crown appeared. "As long as I keep it with me, I'm certain no thief will ever be able to get it. Her confidence, however, was cut when a metallic claw snatched it out of her aura. What? Every pony looked upward towards the ceiling, never noticing that Carmen was overhead on the vaulted arch. Suction cups held her from a belt while she used a grappling gun to reel up the crown. I've got to hand it to you, Princess, Carmen said, holding the crown, and examining it. That was a clever plan that I nearly walked in on. Good thing I've decided to listen in to see where you've been keeping this. From one great woman to another, I might have tipped my hat to you. Give that back, Carmen. Twilight took to the air. And before Carmen could make a move, she conjured a protective shield around her, trapping her in a translucent bubble. Ha! I've got you. Where she had expected Carmen to be at least worried, instead the pixelated look was more confident. And hello again, detective. For a moment there I was worried that I might have been too smart for you and your team. I'm glad that there are some brains after all. Boast all you want, it's game over for you. Carmen smiled. Oh detective, the game isn't over until I say so. And besides, she raised her hand, clenching her fist around the crown, we're almost to the finale. To Twilight's surprise, Carmen threw the crown down on the shield as hard as she could, and it disrupted the shield enough to have Twilight lose her concentration. The crown fell quickly to the ground, and as Twilight was distracted, Carmen pressed up against a particular stone on the arch where it opened. Before Twilight realized what was happening, Carmen slipped away through the secret passage, closing behind her before Twilight could go after her. Luna meanwhile caught her crown with her magic. Ugh! She got away again. Twilight frantically searched for that secret button but failed to do so. I can't believe it, I just had her. Twilight, Luna called out, eyeing her crown. She spotted a note that was tapped on. I think your thief left something behind. Back in the library, the students and Spike watched as a frustrated Twilight flew down to see what Luna found. The screen dissolved into a close-up of the note that was written the following clue. My next theft, to take a state where the pavement is pound. Chapter 6, The Great Puzzle. When Twilight returned to the School of Friendship's library, she found her students already hard at work. Ocellus and Spike were at the computer, going over the previous encounters with Carmen. Gallus, Smolder, and Sandbar were over by the chalkboard, looking over the latest clue. Silverstream flipped through Ocellus's notes. Anyona sat in one of the beanbag chairs, deep in thought. Spike turned around, spotting Twilight entering the room. You okay, Twilight? She frowned. Yeah, but I almost had her this time. I know. Spike got out of his seat and walked over to hug her. It's already been a tough day. And a tough clue, Sandbar commented. This one is seriously a brain teaser, especially when it doesn't make sense. Twilight nodded. I've been thinking about it too, and nothing is coming to mind what she's referring to. Silverstream looked up from the notes. Headmare, didn't you say that Carmen usually has a theme? Yes, why? Well, lately, I've been thinking about what it could be. And I'm not too certain if it's all about power. This got every creature's attention. What do you mean? Smolder asked. Think about it, power is such a big idea that goes out to all sorts of things. Not just with who's in charge, but it could range from all sorts of things from companies to tribes. Auntie Novo once said that there is always more than one way to rule, and from what you and the professors had taught me, is that it's widely diverse. So that got me thinking, why choose to steal these things in particular? Right, Gallus nodded. First the Bloodstone Scepter, then the Changeling Throne, then the Magic Pearl, the Idol of Boreas, now Luna's Crown. Gallus paused. Yeah, no, doesn't that sound like a list of stuff that a monarch needs to be seen as being in charge? But Silverstream is right, they're too specific. Ocellus pointed out. I've looked up all sorts of national treasures from all over the world, and I think there were other stuff she could have gone after. But those items have very little in common with one another except, her eyes widened. Oh. That's it? What? Spike asked. They have to do with us. Ocellus exclaimed. Every item Carmen has stolen or attempted to steal has something to do with each of us. The scepter for Smolder, the throne for me, the pearl for Silverstream, the idol for Gallus, and the crown for Sandbar. All these things have a connection with all of us. This got Yona's attention. Then, Yona's next. Twilight put a hoof to her chin. That might be the most logical. No, it's more than logical. She turned towards the chalkboard. My next theft, to take a state where the pavement is pound. Just to be sure, let's break this clue down. The word state has thrown me off because it could refer to many things. State being a country, a part of land, or even a whole city. The latter might make sense as there are city-states like the Crystal Empire. But if she might be after a city, which one? Because where the pavement is pound leaves a lot to interpretation. Wait a minute. Smolder snapped her claws. Carmen might be playing some word games here. Quick, what's another word for pound? Beat. Sandbar guessed. Stamp. Silverstream suggested. Smash. Yona hopped out of her seat. Yona knows what Carmen going to steal next. Really? Spike blinked. How do you know? Thief has stolen important things from friends, but not Yona. Yona's homeland will be next. And Yona knows what thief will steal. Yak thinks Carmen is going after Yakyakistan itself. In that stunned moment, Twilight turned to the chalkboard, to steal a state where the pavement is pound. Maybe the pavement is referring to the ground, where the ground is pound. In Yak culture, they take pride in stomping or smashing with their hooves. Maybe that's what she's missing on her list. Silverstream said, everything up this point sounds like items that a monarch would have, all except for one thing. A palace or a fortress. A place to reign from. So, stealing something like Yakyakistan makes perfect sense. A proud fortress indeed. Yona said proudly. Yaks have walls that never fell. And maybe that's why Carmen wants it? Twilight agreed. One thing that bothers me, is if we're getting close to the end of her game. Still, Spike pointed out. We have a good idea what she's going next and what she's going to steal. But we're overlooking one important thing, Twilight said with a frown. And what's that, Headmare? Sandbar asked. When I played the game, there was the final level. What are you talking about? In the game, after you had gone after her goons and stopped her from stealing artifacts from around the world, the last level is to figure out where Carmen is. And unfortunately, it's the hardest part of all. The room was quiet for a moment, until Smolder exclaimed, why didn't you say anything about this before? I thought that we might be able to catch her before we got to that point. But even in real life, she's a lot trickier than I thought. Still, Yona said. We know where Carmen going. Now to stop her from stealing Yona's home. After a beat, Twilight nodded, you're right. Whatever Carmen has planned, we still need to warn Yakyakistan for what's coming. Yona, you come with me. And for the rest of you, if anything new from Carmen shows up on that screen, let me know immediately. Soon enough, Twilight and Yona vanished in a burst of light. It wasn't uncommon for Yakyakistan to be on high alert. To the Yaks, being prepared for any attack in such an unforgiving, icy land is not just a must, but important to their heritage. So, when Twilight and Yona went up to Prince Rutherford, it didn't take too long for Yakyakistan to be up in arms. Literally in this case. Within minutes, the small city-state had rushed into action. Horns blasted, hooves rushed to put in their armor, and weapons gathered as adult Yaks rushed to their battle stations. If anything, Twilight was impressed by how quickly they were able to respond to a threat at the last minute. Yakyukistan was in full pursuit to prepare for siege warfare, with yaks lined up along the walls, catapults ready to be fired, hooves ready to smash. All eyes looked outward for any sign of Carmen. "Thief won't ever get through," Prince Rutherford said confidently. "Thief won't take Yakyukistan when yaks beat thief back." Standing on the mighty wall, Twilight hoped that was the case. Prince Rutherford scanned over the icy mountains and pointed up to her. "Will thief come by land or air?" "That's what makes Carmen so difficult," Twilight said, a nervous frown on her face, waiting for any response from Spike's end. "She's difficult to predict." "It has to be Yakyukistan, is it?" Yona asked Twilight. She too stood on the wall in armor. "Has Yona got it wrong?" "No, I think you're right on this. If Carmen's clue points anywhere, it must be here." "How thief steal Yakyukistan?" Prince Rutherford questioned. "Yakyukistan too big for thief to carry off. I wouldn't underestimate her if I were you." Just then, a green flame appeared before her, and a moment later, a scroll metallized. Unrolling it, she quickly read its contents, wrote a reply, and sent it with a spell. "I just told my students to answer the question correctly. Let's see what happens next. Get ready and keep your eyes peeled." So all of Yakyukistan waited, and waited. Nervous, resilient eyes searched for something, anything that was out of place. Anything that would raise an alarm. On the wall, Twilight was going through the list of spells and counterspells just so that Carmen would certainly not be getting away with it this time. "Over there!" Rutherford shouted, pointing his hoof towards the sky. Everyone looked up to see something flying way overhead. A moment later, something dropped from it, fell, and then a red parachute sprang out. As it got closer, they saw a small red box drifting towards them. "Let me go get it," Twilight unfolded her wings. "I think Carmen has left us a clue instead." She flew up towards the descending box, catching it with her hooves. Below, Yakyukistan was ready to throw and stomp whatever thing had invaded their home, so she looked down and said, "It's all right. I don't think Carmen is going to show up." Returning to the side of the wall where the prince and Yona were, she sat the box down and opened it. A small screen folded out, showing an applauding Carmen. "Bravo, detectives." "Bravo," she smiled. "I must admit that I was disappointed that I won't get to steal Yakyukistan today, but I'm proud that you were able to solve my clue." "Yona thinks you not good thief," Yona said. "Thief didn't talk half what thief promised. Thief failed to take Yakyukistan." "True. But as someone as experienced as I, you learn that the size of the job isn't as important as the impact it has in the end, detective." "No, she's right," Twilight pointed out. "So far we were able to stop you several times, even when you could easily steal the items. You flat out not taking them or leaving them alone does make it sound more incompetent than anything." Carmen laughed. "I disagree. Sometimes what may be seen as unimportant or a series of big mistakes, might very well be planned out. When you get to be as experienced as I am, you learn that the packaging is just as important as the information." Twilight held the screen up, and an angry look came across her face. "We will find you." Carmen's grin widened. "I would love to see you try, detective." This brings us to my final clue. Guessing where I'm going next shouldn't be that hard, everything has to start at the beginning. With that, the screen cut to static before shutting off, and the screen moved away to reveal something unusual inside. Twilight moved it out with her magic, lifting it out of the box. It was a tiny clay cylinder and the outside of it depicted a bull. One question was on her mind as she examined it. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Then, a green flash appeared, and on it, Spike wrote the following. "Now it's asking for a password." Chapter 7, Where is Carmen Sandiego? On the ancient computer screen, Twilight stared at the most confounding part of this entire misadventure. A message from Carmen asked for a password. 5 letters long, and there was no hint as to what it could be. Indeed, even the previous clue didn't seem to help at all. If she was honest, it didn't make any sense. Everything has to start at the beginning. Along with the clay cylinder, it looked as though there was no link anywhere. The beginning of what? Twilight muttered. Over by the chalkboard, Ocellus looked over all the notes that were on it. The clues that were written, the items stolen, where Carmen had gone to. For whatever reason, it felt as though they were missing something. A vital clue that would point them in the right direction. You know what's really odd about all this? Spike asked aloud. What? Twilight asked. What Carmen said. What does she mean by, the packaging is just as important as the information? Over by a beanbag chair, Silverstream sat up. Hey, I've heard that before. Gallus closed the dictionary, rubbing his tired eyes. He asked, how? Well, growing up in Sequestria, not a lot of Seapanese know how to read because there isn't much to write anything down with. So, to pass down our knowledge, culture, stories, histories, and such, what we do is that we show them. Acting them out as perfectly as we can so the next generation would learn about it. Even when I did learn about reading from my aunt, I asked her once why we couldn't just put everything down in writing. She told me that while we could, the experience of seeing something is just as valuable, how something is presented could make a world of difference. She said that sometimes the packaging is just as important as the information. Ocellus's ears perked up. You know what if I'm looking at this wrong? Huh? Sandbar tilted his head. What do you mean? At first, I thought maybe the password lies in these clues. But what if it isn't? What if we've been given the password already in plain sight? Here, let me show you what I mean. Going over to the computer, she moved the mouse and clicked on a few buttons. Remember when it started to play the thefts in real time that they had words that showed what every creature was saying? Yeah. Smolder folded her arms. What about it? I didn't think of it at the time, but I've noticed something odd. Here, she clicked on the first scene in the Dragonlands. Pay close attention to the words here at the bottom and see if anything stands out. As her friends, Twilight and Spike gathered around, Ocellus replayed the events from this morning. They watched as Carmen stole the Bloodstone Scepter, and Ember called out for her to stop. There. Thief is spelled wrong. Why is it spelled with an A? Maybe it's a glitch. Twilight wondered aloud. A what? An error on the game's part. Yeah, but look at the rest of this, everything else is spelled right except for that word. Yeah, but why focus on a single misspelling? Spike asked. Because it wasn't the only time that happened. Ocellus clicked to the next theft. Pay close attention to this, as well. They watched for a bit, showing the hive before a couple of changelings entered in. There, crafts is spelled wrong. Everything else is fine but that word is clearly spelled wrong. It's almost like it was done on purpose. Yona's eyes widen. It's not mistake. What? Spike asked. Maybe that is what thief meant. What might be unimportant, or mistakes might be planned out. Twilight looked at the screen, the gears turning in her head. Is the misspelling from every robbery? Not with Griffinstone, but otherwise, it's there. An idea popped into her head. Oh, that's clever. What is it, Headmare? Sandbar asked. It's a cipher. Those misspellings weren't an accident at all, they were intentional. And look, a password of a 5-letter word, but you said that there are mistakes in all except one? Well, 6 minus 1, that's 5. Carmen is subtly showing us the password. Whipping the chalkboard clean, Twilight grabbed out a piece of chalk. Let's go through this one at a time. She scribbled on the board. Thief is supposed to have an E, not an A. Crafts are supposed to have an R, not a B. She jotted the words down, placing the correct letter underneath them. Okay, what else? Ocellus showed the scenes from Sequestria. Silverstream is missing an I. Then in Canterlot, should is spelled with a D, not a B. And then Yakyakistan. There's no double O in through, but a U. Out of this deduction, a word appeared. Eridu. Twilight stood back and repeated, guessing where I'm going next shouldn't be that hard, everything has to start at the beginning. Eridu. Gallus tilted his head, who or what is Eridu? It's the name of an ancient Mesopotamian city, said to be one of the very first cities in history. Twilight put a hoof to her chin, that also explains the clay cylinder. It might be a reproduction or an artifact of a Mesopotamian seal used for imprinting on clay tablets. And that must mean that the bull depicted must be the bull of heaven that was mentioned in the epic of King Gilgamesh, the oldest story ever written. With a smile, she confidently went over to the keyboard and typed in the password. Eridu. A moment later, there was a loading screen that weighed in the answer. And then, there was a ding. Password correct. The screen went black for a moment before showing a map of the whole world, and there was a single red dot that hovered over the northern part of Saddle Arabia, in a place between two rivers. It makes sense now. Twilight said, she's in northern Saddle Arabia, in the part that used to be Mesopotamia. In particular, the city of Eridu. With confidence swelling up inside her, she turned to her students. I think that this game is just about over for Carmen. Besides, she added with a smirk, let's not make it easier for her to escape either. In the desert of shifting sand dunes, ruins of mud bricks lay the foundations of a once mighty city. Where once there was life of bustling streets, squeaking wheel carts, and the noise of livestock, now only the silent whispering winds are heard in Eridu. In the center of the ruined city, a ziggurat stands with its many bricks crackling and tumbling but keeping its overall shape. At the very top of its many steps, on a pile of rubble, a wooden throne sat with Carmen on it. With the bloodstone scepter in her hands, she waited. It was rather disappointing that her detectives had correctly guessed most of the clues. After all, it would have been quite a sight. A midnight crown on her head, a magical pearl for a necklace, the scepter in one hand, the idol of Boreas in the other, sitting on a throne in the center of a mighty fortress on top of the oldest palace in the entire world. It would have been poetic and magnificent, but then again, her game, her rules. Out from the horizon, underneath the heat of the scorching sun, a figure appeared in the distance, flying towards the city. Carmen raised an eyebrow. She had expected there would be far more, considering that she had stolen a couple of royal treasures. It was rather underwhelming if she was honest, but then again, an audience of one is still an audience. Soon it became clear who exactly it was. Princess Twilight drew closer to the ruined ziggurat. Well, hello there, detective, Carmen called out when Twilight was close enough. I half expected that everyone else would be here. I'm going to give you one last chance, she said, surrender now, and give those back, or be put behind bars for a very long time. Carmen sat back, amused. Adorable, detective. But who's going to make me? It's only just you. Twilight landed on the top of the steps of the ziggurat. I'll admit, today has been stressful, but in the end, we've beaten your game. Now give those back. Oh. Carmen stood up from the throne, a smile on her face. You and what army? Suddenly, a large hawk swooped down and snatched the scepter. What? Looking up, the hawk climbed up to the sky before halting. A green flame enveloped the bird before giving way to Ocellus, holding the scepter. We will. Carmen circled around. At every side Twilight students climbed up over to the top, including Smolder behind the throne. Overhead Gallus and Spike flew down, blocking her from going upwards. Sandbar, Silverstream, and Yona cornering her from each side. Give it up, Carmen, Twilight warned, you have nowhere to run. As a great philosopher once said, even when trapped, there's always a way out. What? Twilight tilted her head, which philosopher said that? She smiled, me, and with a stomp of her shoe, she fell through the floor and into the tunnels of the ziggurat. As soon as she hit the floor, she made a run for it, rushing into the dark with nothing but a flashlight. However, just as she was turning a corner, she came face to face with Ember and dozens of dragons. Carmen ran the other way, towards a staircase that descended downwards. Down past arches in the walls that held ancient statues, but as Carmen was running, she realized something. Those weren't there before. And indeed, they weren't. From behind her the statues busted into green flames and were replaced by colorful changelings that too chased after her. Reaching into her red trench coat pocket, she tossed a few smoke bombs behind her, hoping to disorient them long enough for her to get away. She rushed towards the bottom of the steps, towards the outside where her getaway vehicle would be, a hovercraft that would zoom out of Eridu. However, as soon as she stepped out, she found her vehicle being crushed and smashed to pieces by rather angry yaks. With escape options running low, and hordes of creatures barreling towards her, she decided to make a run for it through the ancient streets. Running past the remains of mud brick ruins and drifting sand as fast as she could, she had thought that she might just make it out unscathed. However, just as she was reaching the dunes, all around her the sands shifted, and out popped hippogriffs and ponies, throwing the blankets to make it appear they sprung out from the ground. And this time, from land and air, she was truly surrounded. By the time Twilight, Spike, and the students had arrived, Carmen Sandiego was put in cuffs. Surrounded by the creatures she stole or attempted to steal from. Among them, Ember and Thorax were there. I think this belongs to you, Dragon Lord, Ocellus said, handing the scepter back. And the throne? Thorax asked. Safe, Twilight told him, and I'll help return it to its rightful place. Thorax thanked her for that. Twilight moved through the armies that surrounded Carmen. In cuffs and chains so that it made it impossible for her to escape. I suppose I should congratulate you on capturing me, detective. I knew we would capture you in the end. But there's still one thing I never fully understood. Out of all the things you could have stolen, why did you steal what you did? Carmen smiled, for your students' benefit, detective. As Sir Francis Bacon once put it, knowledge is power. By the looks of it, they were at least able to outsmart me. You should be proud of that. She tipped her hat towards her, see you next crime. And to every creature's amazement, Carmen Sandiego's pixelated form went fuzzy, blurred until within a moment, she disappeared with the chains and cuffs falling into the sand. One of the hippogriffs went over to the spot where Carmen was, and felt around for a while. Where did she go? I think we did it. Twilight said, we've finally beaten the game. It took a long time for Twilight to teleport everyone where they needed to be. After thanking everyone for catching Carmen, and returning the blood scepter to the Badlands and the throne to the Changeling Hive, she, Spike, and her students returned to the school's library. On the screen, it showed the menu, asking the player to continue or play a new game. Twilight instead chose to eject the CD out and shut the computer off. I'm so sorry that things didn't go what I hoped would be, she said to her students. Well, not gonna lie, Sandbar told her, except for it being real, it was rather fun solving it. Yeah, Silverstream nodded. I've learned a bunch of stuff today. Never thought we would be this good at solving puzzles. Smolder smiled pridefully. Besides, Ocellus came through with a lot of things while the rest of us were stuck. It was nothing. Ocellus blushed. What are ya talking about? Gallus questioned. None of us would have figured out where Carmen was half the time if it wasn't for you. Every creature did, Yona nodded. Even Yona. Besides, Smolder added, It was really exciting to catch a world-class thief like Carmen, solving clues and stuff that I would play again, as long as nothing in the real world isn't stolen. Really? Twilight blinked. You all mean that? Sandbar shrugged. I mean, we're still in summer school, right? If we're gonna learn, I'd rather do that. Minus all the, yeah no. Right, Twilight nodded, noticing the time. And again, sorry for holding you all for so long, it's already getting late. So, for a treat, we'll have no class tomorrow, but we'll start up again the day after. Everyone agreed to the idea. After bidding Twilight goodbye and leaving the library, she turned to Spike, who asked, "So where did you get that crazy game anyway?" "I asked Discord to modify it so it could be playable and teach Equestria's history, geography, etc." "Oh. That explains a lot. Yeah, knows I could have told you that would be a bad idea." Twilight frowned. "I'm very much aware of it. If anything, tomorrow I'm going to find Discord to give him a piece of my mind." "Oh Twilight, you should know better," Discord said, his tail swinging in front of her face. "You don't come looking for me, I come looking for you." Turning around, Twilight found Discord overhead in a red, orange, and yellow vest with an exaggerated white collar and a big bushy afro on his head. "Also, congratulations on completing the game, Gumshoe. At this rate, you might land yourself as a real Acme detective." "Discord. Why didn't you tell me that you made Carmen real? I asked you to change the game to teach my students. And I did. But I also asked you to let me give my special flair to it. But you never said that." "You didn't ask," Discord stuck his tongue out. Twilight sent a blast of magic at his head, but Discord ducked out of the way in time. However, his afro was vaporized, leaving a noticeably smoldering hole. "He frowns, touchy, touchy." He took off the wig. "Still, you must admit, it was rather awesome to chase after a rather cool thief and outsmart her. That gang up at Eridu was a nice, satisfying touch, would you say? Yet it almost sent the world into panic." Discord raised an eyebrow. "Okay, you're right, I should have seen it coming. But still," she held up the CD in her aura. "Except for making Carmen real, even I think this would make a good teaching tool." It did exactly that. "So how about this? Why don't you replace a certain element in this?" "What do you mean?" "That instead of making Carmen Sandiego real, why not change the plot of the story every time they restarted the game? That way none of us would know what Carmen might go after next, and it would broaden the spectrum for my students as well. Even if it's not on the test. So, what do you say?" Discord hummed, his lion's paw stroking his goat beard. "You know what, why not? But in exchange, I want my OC cheesy henchman that she hires, and to turn your bedroom into a theme park for a whole afternoon. Deal?" Twilight handed the CD over to Discord, which he took into his protruding tooth and spun it around until it glowed before handing it back. Discord turned to Spike. "So, are we still up for guys' night on Thursday?" "Uh-huh," Spike nodded, "and don't forget to bring chips with you. We're gonna need lots of it. Way ahead of you. See you around, you two." In a burst of confetti, Discord was gone. Brushing away, Spike asked, "You didn't ask what kind of theme park Discord is going to turn your bedroom into." "Whatever it is, I bet it couldn't top what happened today." Twilight set the disk near the old computer. "Still, I've had a long day and I'm starving. So, let's go out to eat? I could really go for some burgers and hayfreeze right about now." "Oh. Can I get a milkshake too?" Spike asked as they headed out of the library. "Why not?" Twilight shut off the lights and closed the door behind them.